Greetings and welcome from Mason Ezel. Here's a very brief and early history of how he got started in the laminating business and founded LSI. Mason grew up in Memphis, Tennessee and graduated from East High School in 1962. Then he attended Memphis State University, graduating in 1967 with a commission as a second lieutenant in the Air Force. He spent 1 year in pilot training in Selma, Alabama, flying the T-37 and then the T-38. After graduation, he was assigned to fly the EC-121 Super Constellation. He spent 1 year flying in Southeast Asia. Mason's last assignment was at McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento, California, flying to Iceland, Japan, and then back to Southeast Asia, and left the Air Force in the summer of 1972. He moved back to Memphis and took a job as an investment banker with UMIC, located downtown in the 100 North Main building. And he worked there for a couple of years until he quit to go full-time in his new laminating business. Here's how that came about. In December of 1974, while still working full-time, he came up with the idea to create baby announcements for parents with newborn babies. It would show up on the front page of their hometown newspaper as to what was going on in the country the day the child was born. Mason would also personalize with pink for a girl or blue for a boy. Also the time of birth, weight of the baby, and parents' names at the bottom. The name of the business was going to be A Day to Remember. He had to lease all the equipment needed, including a PMT camera, new electrostatic copier, an IBM typewriter. They were now living in the Germantown Square apartments. Mason had to subscribe to several out-of-town newspapers to get the announcements with their parents' addresses. The PMT camera was used to photograph the front page of the newspaper and then reduce it to a size that would fit on an 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of copier paper that was already printed in pink or blue. This was a direct mail type business, and having no experience in this type business, over the next few months they did not sell enough announcements to keep the business going. He was forced to sell all the equipment that was leased. About the same time, someone showed him a laminated article out of the newspaper. He was so impressed with the laminating process that he thought it might be a good business. So, a call to the GBC representative bought a 4-inch pouch laminator, and that's how they got their start in the laminating business. Now, as the founder and owner of Lamination Service, most of his adult life went into building the company over the last 40-plus years, starting in 1974 with the one small GBC pouch laminator in his apartment in Germantown, selling laminated luggage tags for $1.50 each. His wife would go around to different businesses and collect business cards from customers, and that night Mason would laminate them into custom laminated luggage tags. Their youngest child and only son, Thomas Mason III, better known as Bubba, was only 2 years old. People were asking if he could laminate larger items like menus, maps, and other things, so he bought an 18-inch roll laminating machine to allow him to laminate larger items. The first laminating job was laminating Pete and Sam's menus. Because the laminator drew such a high electrical current, it kept tripping the circuit breaker. This caused him to turn everything off in the apartment except the laminator. They had to use candles to see what they were doing. During this time, Mason had a full-time job as an investment banker to try and make ends meet. All the laminating work had to be done at night or on the weekend. With a family of 3 children, so more space was needed than was in the apartment. They decided to move to a rental house on Tam-o-Shanter in the Fox Meadows area that had a 2-car garage. Mason set up shop with his laminating machine in the garage and started calling on printers and advertising agencies in the Memphis area for their business. While the first year's business was growing, sales were approximately $13,000. After about a year, the landlord wanted his house back for his daughter, so a move was mandatory. They were able to buy their first home just a few blocks away on Pebble Beach in Hickory Hill. The family moved into the house that also had a two-car garage that would house the laminating plant. Then the first big break came, a job for 25,000 laminated steak and egg menus. They also had a very short time to complete the job, so Mason ordered a second, larger 25-inch laminator. When the laminator was delivered, it was broken. When the job arrived, they had to laminate and hand trim out all 25,000 menus on one machine. And they were forced to move to a small office park on 2892 Democrat Road, leasing 1,350 square feet. After that first big laminating job, Mason quit his full-time job and devoted full time to his own business. Sales that second year were $22,000. Now, with a few years of hard work, going to work at 4 or 5 a.m. each morning, working late nights and weekends to get everything done, his candle was burning at both ends. During this time frame, the business went into other types of work, which included binding, mounting, and other types of handwork. Lamination Service was the company that most local printers used for all such work. Soon we noticed that some of the menus were now being printed on a plastic-type paper that would not require laminating. Because of this, Mason decided to start selling laminating equipment and supplies. A telemarketing department was formed to call on military bases, hospitals, colleges, and universities, and all large companies that required their employees to use ID badges. They sold everything that was used to make the ID badges, including Polaroid film, pouch laminators, laminating pouches, clips, lanyards, cameras and film, die cutters, and anything else the customer might need. At this point in time, the ID sales grew faster than the laminating area. Mr. Ezel kept the business there for several years and began leasing 2 other bays next to the office. The next few years, in 1977, $97,000. 1978, $114,000. 1979, $227,000. 1980, $389,000. So, it was time to move to a bigger and newer location. The landlord could custom bill the new space and would pay for the move and giving them several months free rent. That was on Senator Street in about 6,500 square feet. Several years later, they were now in the 1983 time frame. By the end of that year, sales had jumped for the first time to over $1 million. That year's sales ended up at $1,260,462, and there were approximately 25 full-time employees. After several more years, the company was again out of space. The time frame was around 1989 to 1990. The landlord again moved them into a new 20,000 square foot facility in the Willow Lake Business Park. Now there were 60 full-time employees. Mr. Ezel now had names for different divisions. Lamination Technology Division, 300 Division, which is what he started, was responsible for about 23% of the gross sales. The Access Technology Division, which was a new division selling and installing access control systems to companies that wanted more control of their facilities, were about 12% of the gross sales. ID Technology, 200 Division, accounted for 65% of the gross sales. At this point, having 3 divisions, the main moneymaker was ID Technology, which mostly carried the other 2 divisions. During this time, the first CPA controller the company had ever had was hired. By the end of 1990, their sales were $4,350,000. In 1991, Mason sold off the Access Technology Division to his son-in-law. That year was the beginning of a new technology for making ID cards. Rather than using a Polaroid camera to make the IDs, the industry was changing to a video imaging all-plastic card, which was now simply printed on a digital hard card printer. Since they were one of Polaroid's largest dealers and resellers of their new digital imaging cameras and software, Mason tried to stay with them for a period of time. Polaroid tried to compete in the marketplace for a while, but couldn't seem to keep up with all the changes. Then he started development of their own software, called Badge Management System, or BMS for short. Several different people were hired to develop the software, and Mason could buy all the necessary components to build their own system. The new division was named Imaging Technologies. At the end of 1992, sales were $3,967,247. Meanwhile, the son Bubba had graduated from college and was working for LSI. He's been a great help to his dad and is mainly working in the laminating technology side of the business. Also, Bubba's best friend Britt Daniel, who is extremely bright and a very hard worker, was hired to help with things at LSI. Then they were fortunate to be able to hire a fine new controller, Joe Martello, to keep them all straight. All three are still with the company. Now, a few years have passed, and the landlord, who encouraged the move to Willow Lake Boulevard, wanted the space for International Paper when the lease was out. They looked around for a building and found a new, empty 44,000 square foot building in Bartlett. Mr. Ezell bought the building and was able to build out exactly what the company needed as to design and function. The building was larger than needed, but it was felt the company would grow into it as time went by. But there is still the same old problem. The ID Technology Division, now known as the 200 Division, is carrying most of the load as in profits. They're now making their own laminating pouches, printing and fabricating ID cards. The 200 Division is strong and doing well. As an example, 200 was making and selling Blockbuster Video 2 million laminating pouches a year. The imaging technology, known as the 100 Division, is coming along with some nice sales. Bubba runs the Laminating Technology Division, known as the 300 Division. As time goes on, Bubba and his dad decide that the only way to make the 300 Division profitable is to become more like a full-line bindery. They embarked on buying or leasing additional equipment which allowed them to perform larger and different types of work. Over the next year or so, they did get some big jobs, but still were not making money on the 300 Division. There's only one other bindery in Memphis, and both seem to be competing for the same business and cutting each other's margins. The Ezells decided that they should make an offer to buy out the competition. However, they didn't want to sell, but would like to buy the 300 Division. So Southern Bindery bought that 300 Division, moved all the equipment, and took all of the 300 employees to their location, which put the laminating and bindery business that was owned by the Ezells out of business. It was then felt that it was time to get into the wide format digital printing business, so a side business called Saber Graphics was started, and two other partners joined in, one of which was running the business. After a few short months, the person running the business was not doing anything, so Mason got rid of the two other partners and incorporated Saber Graphics into LSI. That was the beginning of the new Division 700, which is the digital imaging business. Bubba runs the business, and they can print large banners and other digital prints. The realization came quickly that if the company wanted to have an outstanding business, there was the need to upgrade their equipment. Mr. Mason Ezell is now 60 years old and thinks it's time for Bubba to get his feet wet, so to speak. In about 2003, Bubba became the president of LSI, and Britt Daniel, the VP of Sales, Joe Martello, the controller, CFO, and Mason maintains the title of CEO. Now that there's an excess of space in the building, the decision was to downsize and sell that building that Mason owned. They ended up selling the building and moved down to the street to the present location. The day-to-day running of the business is done by 3 executives with help from many others. One day the word came of a sign business that was for sale, and Mason wanted to investigate that opportunity. Joe Martello and Bubba crunched the numbers, and they decided to make an offer to buy Joyce Sign. She accepted their offer, and soon they moved Joyce Sign Company and their people to LSI. It's been a great purchase and a great fit with the 700 division. Bubba has done a great job of growing the printing division. This company is probably the largest wide-format digital printing company in the Mid-South. They now have a new $1 million contract with a large national company. Britt has also done a great job of managing the 200 division, and the sales continue to grow along with the profit margins. Also, for the past few years, they've sold all sorts of promotional products. It is a small part of their business, but they have some great customers. Now, take a look at some pictures and videos of our equipment that are in the new office. It's been a short, brief history of lamination service. Now known as LSI, they've just hit the high points of the last 40-plus years. And thank you for watching.